励志故事人与藏獒狗的感人故事 Inspirational story, the touching story of man and Tibetan Mastiff. Inspirational story, the touching story of man and Tibetan Mastiff. This story is not about the heroic deeds of how a dog fights to the death to protect its owner in a harsh environment, but about a little-known Tibetan Mastiff. There is a couple living in Beijing. They raised a Tibetan Mastiff together, and they have a deep relationship with the Tibetan Mastiff. Later they moved into a new community, and since the Tibetan Mastiff was an overstandard dog, it was forbidden to feed them in the community. The couple had no choice but to give it away, but no friends were willing to accept such a Tibetan Mastiff. In the end, they had no choice but to release the Tibetan Mastiff. He drove the Tibetan Mastiff to the outskirts 300 kilometers away. Unexpectedly, the Tibetan Mastiff came back by itself the next day. A few days later, the property management of the community told the couple that they could not feed the Tibetan Mastiff, and had no choice but to release it again, this time from a farther place. To the surprise of the owner, the Tibetan Mastiff came back after traveling all the way, and at this time the Tibetan Mastiff is already very weak. The couple were very distressed and decided to keep them to the end. But not long after, his wife became pregnant, and the two had to send the Tibetan Mastiff away again, in order to prevent the Tibetan Mastiff from running back by itself. They decided to transport the Tibetan Mastiff in the trunk. Before departure, the Tibetan Mastiff refused to get into the car, but in the end, the Tibetan Mastiff hesitantly got into the trunk. After driving for a period of time, the hostess got out of the car to have a look, only to find that the Tibetan Mastiff had bitten her tongue and killed herself. The Tibetan Mastiff understands that the owner also has difficulties, so he left the world in this way. The couple regretted it so much that they moved to the suburbs and adopted many dogs. That's another story. 励志故事人与藏獒狗的感人故事。这个故事所讲的不是在恶劣的环境中狗狗如何进行生死搏斗保护主人的英勇事迹。它讲的是一只名不见经传的藏獒。有一对夫妇住在北京，他们一起养了一只藏獒，并且同藏獒的感情很深厚。后来他们搬进了新的小区，由于藏獒属于超标犬，所以小区中禁止喂养。没有办法，夫妇两人只好把它送人，可是没有朋友愿意接受这样一只藏獒，最后没有办法，夫妇两人准备将藏獒放生。他开车将藏獒送到了300公里远的郊外。没想到的是，第二天那只藏獒居然自己回来了。没过几天，小区物业又告诉夫妇俩不能喂养藏獒，没办法，只得再次放生，这一次是更远的地方。令主人吃惊的是，这只藏獒经过一路奔波，居然又回来了，而且此时的藏獒已经很虚弱。夫妇俩非常心疼，决定让养到底了。但是没过多久，妻子有了身孕，2人不得不再次将藏獒送走。为了让藏獒不再自己跑回来，他们决定将藏獒放在后备箱中运走。临出发的时候，藏獒说什么也不肯上车，但是最后藏獒终于迟疑地进了后备箱。车开了一段时间以后，女主人不大放心，便下车看看，却发现藏獒已经咬舌自尽了。藏獒明白主人也有不得已的苦衷，唯有以此方式离开了人世间。夫妇俩后悔万分，搬到郊外收养了许多的狗，那便是后话了。